My presentation today is going to be over Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Points. Uh, Malcolm Gladwell is a well-known author. He's written books like Blank and Outliers, and Tipping Points is another one of his books in the series. It's the #1 national bestseller. And how little things can make a big difference. What he's talking about there is that whenever we talk about things that happen, whether it be social or cultural or sales epidemics, things like that across the country, it's just the little thing that actually tips us over into a tipping point in making something be an epidemic. Most of the time, whenever we think about epidemics, we think of people getting sick with the flu or with different diseases, bird flu, SARS in Asia, and he explains that as being an epidemic and how things spread, and how one little thing, a person who travels overseas or a person who brings that disease into a new place, or an example that I like to think of is whenever the Pilgrims came actually to America, they brought smallpox and diseases and things with them that they didn't see as a problem, but because they had been living with them all their lives, and a lot of those people had built up immunities, where the new people, the Indians, the Native Americans, they didn't have any type of built-up resistance to it. Now, in talking about Malcolm's book, though, The Tipping Points, he discusses drugs, sexually transmitted diseases, and then one of his biggest examples is actually hush puppy shoes. He talks about how a small group of people created a social epidemic across the country, and how 20, 30, maybe up to 100 people at most, probably on the Upper East Side of New York, started wearing these hush puppies, and truly caused a social epidemic across the country, where a brand of hush puppy shoe, which was almost extinct, that the people who actually owned the company, Wolverine, were discussing shutting the entire line down. And because of these people who were wearing them, created a social epidemic across the country and made a ton of people start buying and wearing hush puppy shoes. And he also discusses in detail about how closing down even just a small project and moving people out of that project, or creating a project, can, with drugs or with a sexually transmitted disease, can cause a social epidemic and have a whole new group of people be exposed to it who weren't exposed to something before, and thus creating the social epidemic because they don't know what they're looking at or what's happening. Next, talking about the big three. When we talk about the big three, we normally think about maybe the GM, Chrysler, Dodge, and Ford, or we think about Miami Heat or the Boston Celtics having the big three. But in this case, he's talking about having the connector, the maven, and the salesman, which are the three essential components into having an epidemic, or a spread of a tipping point, actually. Now, the connector is the person who knows all the people that you need to know to start the epidemic. They have a list or a memory of who connects who. He talks about in the book that there was actually a study done where it kind of was the first of the 6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon and things like that, how they gave people in a small town in Nebraska a man who lived in Boston, and they had to get the letter to him only by people that they know. And it came all the way down to it. Almost every single letter came through about 3 or 4 different people. And those people were the connectors. Those people knew this one man. They knew all these other people, though, all funneled into those 3 or 4 people. And those people are essential in an epidemic. The next is the maven. These are the people who we trust. Consumer Reports and all the person who we consider our own Consumer Reports, the person who helps us make buying decisions, they're essential to have in the salesman, or in the epidemic. And then the salesman, the person who actually sells the idea, who comes up with the marketing plan, who knows the way to create social trends, they're also essential in there. And finally, having the stickiness factor. He talks about Sesame Street and things like that. It's something that's different. It's something that can truly bring an idea all together and make it a sticking point. Much like the Hush Puppies, having to have the people who are in the fashion magazines and things like that create that stickiness factor. So that is Tipping Points by Malcolm Gladwell, and thank you very much.